Mercy, welcome to Riveter's Time Well Spent.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to start with some context of yours that's different than many of our other guests. You are a professional freelancer, which is kind of a contract position. You go in and out. Tell me about how it feels kind of to end a contract right before COVID hits and again, kind of the world changes for you.
Yeah, that was kind of wild. It was pretty funny because when I ended my contract, a lot of my coworkers are like, "Why are we throwing you a party? You're gonna just end up coming right back." I had been there for quite a while, and funny enough, I'm like, after the fact, I joked with them, I'm like, "Aren't we glad we had my going away party? Because we never would have thought like a pandemic would have hit." Yeah, but it was untimely. We didn't know that the world was going to be impacted by this. I thought most likely I'd end up going back to that same company. Didn't happen, and I found myself like officially unemployed.
Now, is that since freelance is a kind of a tough gig sometimes? Have you been in an unemployment position before, or is this your first time?
Yeah, this will probably be, I think, my second time. I'm trying to think. First time I was full time for many years, like probably about 10 years, and that ended, and I had a lapse there before my first freelance gig. Then yeah, I guess thinking about it, I've had several lapses. I think the biggest lapse ever was 6 months. The second biggest would be this one, which has been 5 months. But as we'll talk about, I am now going to be gainfully employed starting on Monday. So yeah, but I definitely have had that struggle of lapses in between projects.
Yeah, so we'll definitely talk about that because that is awesome. What have you unemployment like many things is something that the first time you ever go through it, it feels. I mean, it's frightening. It pulls at you. It's difficult. What's something that you I don't know some wisdom that you gain going through this time and time again? What's different about this time than perhaps the first time you had to go through it?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like automatically knowing my next steps. So automatically, as soon as you can file for unemployment, doing that. Also, making sure you have health coverage. So that's always been a big deal. Like figuring out whether you want to stick with Cobra or in California. We're fortunate enough to have covered California. So you can also look into that and figure out what's best bet for you. I think also always financially planning. I think maybe the first few goes at freelance, I wasn't in such a like financially secure place. Blessed to have been a bit more financially secure as I kept going on with my freelance career. But I think that's one thing too, contingent on wherever you might be on the financial spectrum. It's making sure you organize a budget and know what you're working with when you're unemployed. And then honestly, like always reconnecting with my network, tapping in with them, checking in on people, overall trying not to neglect that throughout the course of my career, but also like obviously honing in on that when unemployed.
Let's talk about the details of it for one moment, and then we'll dive into the broader part. You mentioned apply for unemployment right away, which
Yes.
is super important, and a lot of people put it off. And it's important to get that right away so that you get the benefits right away. You mentioned health coverage, which some people go with Cobra, like you said in California. There's Covered California, and being able to understand what you're going to be covered for and how quickly you can get that is very important. Tell me about the third one you mentioned, which is financial planning. What are some of the things when you're going into and you're like, oh man, like this might be a couple of months of unemployment? What are some of the things that you're thinking about? What are the lifestyle changes that you're thinking about? And where are you putting your efforts?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main one obviously is always like home and car payment. I think those are the two buckets contingent on whether you have, you're renting, you have a mortgage, or you do or don't have a car payment. I think those are the most important ones to check off the list. Then after that, there's other, supplemental but important like internet, cell phone, etc. that obviously still need to be put in the bucket. But even little simple things like for myself, this time knowing that we were in the middle of pandemic and not knowing how long it was going to, go on for, which now has been months. Like I made sure to call my cell phone coverage company to like decrease my plan, play around with my plan, certain things, maybe like obviously we weren't allowed to eat out for a while, but tapping into that and cooking more at home, maybe working out more at home versus having like a gym membership, whether now during the pandemic or before. There was a lot of times where I was just kind of going for runs or bicycle rides outside because you know what, they're free. So that was like one important thing, like obviously knowing the major bills that need to be paid, but then there's other ones that are maybe a bit more discretionary where you can remove or play around with.
So you'd call your phone company and renegotiate your plan for a little bit, yeah?
For the most part, like I'll take off extra items like insurance. I had one that had like a hotspot, like a premium hotspot for international travel. I'm like, well, that's probably not happening right now because you could use your phone internationally at a discounted rate, and then also it would serve as a hotspot. So I'm like, yeah, that's not happening. So don't need that. As long as I have Wi-Fi at home, I'm good. So yeah, so little things like that.
I love that. No, but I think being considerate of certainly like the bells and whistles and cutting the fat on that, like you said, maybe eat out a little bit less, but also knowing those big payments. I think a lot of people should actually go to their landlord and try to renegotiate rents where possible, because many landlords will say, sure, we'll push it back by a month or we'll backload it to the end. So being thoughtful about the finances is super important.
Yeah, so to that point, actually, my unit or building, they're not going to increase the rent until they'll take a look at it next year. So that was something we didn't even ask for, and it was super considered on their part.
That's really great. Tell me about kind of once you've packaged that up. That's maybe the first 2 to 3 weeks. You're really figuring out all the details. What does a kind of a day look like for you? Any given Tuesday look like for you when you're unemployed?
Yeah, so I think I'll focus on this time around. I think with the pandemic, I think super important is getting out in nature. So obviously I have a dog, which you know, so fortunately I get to get out at least twice a day. And that's been key, like setting up the morning with a nature walk. Like sometimes I'll walk by the beach, sometimes I'll walk in just other beautiful parts of the neighborhood. And I think that's key, being in nature. Going either maybe making coffee here, going for a coffee run, contingent on whether or not I'm feeling lazy in the morning, I might just grab a coffee. So that's key. I think also aiming to meditate 5 minutes before even opening up my laptop. That's another practice that I've been doing, and it's been serving me really nicely. And then after that, right now, I actually have a daily stand-up every morning, Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. It's a group of amazing women. I felt like I needed something to keep me accountable and keep me motivated. So I was on a bunch of Slack groups for different organizations that I've kind of partnered up with, and asked and just put it out there, like, is anyone else interested? So we have about 7 women meeting every morning, 10 a.m. We're going through what we accomplished yesterday, what we're going to accomplish today, and then we even go through parking lot. So it's any like career questions or just any certain items that they might be stuck in, like, does anyone know how to approach a recruiter about this? So that's been super helpful, and that's kind of laid the foundation for me to kind of have a routine while I was out of work. So that's been key. And then the rest of the day is everything from like one-on-ones, a lot of one-on-ones during the week. Every day I usually have 1 or 2 one-on-ones, keeping up with like cool, interesting panels, whether it's tech, career, marketing, definitely going to those, adding the LinkedIn contacts after that, connecting with those LinkedIn contacts, and then making sure to search for job opportunities. And I think the key is applying or looking for work where you have a connection at. I think times are really tough right now, and the cold applying is, you might get lucky, but I think why get lucky and really be strategic and go for like those opportunities that you do have a contact at. So that's also like some of the time will be devoted to that, of course.
Tell me about that daily stand-up. Tell me a little more about that. Did you know these women before you did this?
I ended up adding an ex-boss because she too was going through some, struggles looking for work and was impacted by the pandemic. But the other women I did not meet until day 1 of our first daily stand-up, which was super cool. They were all on one particular Slack channel from a webinar that I had attended, that I joined their Slack channel. And I was just at a point where I was feeling really unmotivated. So I felt like I needed to kind of have that extra push, and I put it out there and people responded. And like a week later we had our first.
This was your initiative, your idea.
My little brainchild, yeah. I mean, we had stand-ups at the previous company I was at, because I worked on a lot of like web-specific projects or content updates for particular website. So I was used to that structure, and I felt like maybe if I bring that back in, like that'll help, and it has helped. There's been like beautiful accomplishments met through that group. Like one of the young ladies hadn't updated her resume, and it was literally like on her to-do list for weeks. And day 3 of our meeting, she was able to report that she had finished her resume.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is something that you accomplished out of this group? What's either short-term or long-term, something that they got you to commit to and do?
Yeah, I think like one outcome that's not, I guess, very specific, but overall, it's just like continuing the momentum and continuing to stay positive and knowing that I'm not the only one in this boat that's either looking for work because they're unemployed or realizing they want to pivot because they're unhappy. But I think overall, like having that daily check-in really allowed me to like stay focused on the job hunt, and it paid off because I think 3 months in, I do have a job offer now, like I mentioned, and I'll be starting on Monday. So I don't know if I would have been as successful if I wasn't part of that group. Just hearing their even like their struggles and their setbacks to like what they've accomplished, like was such a beautiful balance to know like, we are all in the same boat. Like you might have a remarkable day where you have 2 job interviews, or you make 2 connections, or you update the 2 versions of your resume, or whatever it may be. You might have a day where you're like, I just want to watch movies all day long. And that's okay. Like one of the girls in the group literally has 1 movie per day. And she'll like call that out every once in a while in the meeting. And that's awesome. Like we should be able to have that balance and still feel good about ourselves. So I think just having that group where it was like, yes, we're focusing on our career initiatives and where we want to be in the long term, but there's also like that vulnerability aspect where we are human, and maybe some days we don't want to do anything because the pandemic is real and we're all hurting in our own ways,
I love what you said about momentum and positivity. I think momentum is one of the key things that you need to do a really, really good job at unemployment. You need the momentum to do the basics we talked about earlier, file and figure out health insurance and get your finances. You need the momentum to keep going after a bunch of rejections, or keep networking, or keep attending groups. Or you need that positivity and momentum is so key. And as for the movie one, I love that when somebody actually joins Riveter, they get an email for us immediately that says, hey, welcome. First things first, apply for unemployment. Make sure you do that. Really important. Next thing, do you have health insurance? If no, go get it. If yes, great, you're taken care of. Next, take a break. Here's a list of our favorite movies. Really relax, enjoy. And I think it's so important to also recognize that it lasts. I mean, as you mentioned, it lasts on average over 4 months in a great economy. And if you can embrace that and say, you know what, like it's going to be 3 to 5 months for me too. What are some movies I want to watch? What is a video game I want to play start to finish? And embrace that it's very okay, and not even more. It's a positive thing to make that part of your daily schedule, as long as it's sort of part of your successful program alongside all the other things you mentioned.
100%. I think with that, exercise is key, right? So whether it's a walk, a jog, a run, power walk, whatever you're into. Like I have my stationary bike and my cruiser bike. So I think that's key too, to keep a fresh perspective and healthy mental state. I think exercise is like one of those key things, along with, watching your movies or picking up a new hobby or playing the guitar, whatever it may be for you. I think exercise is a key component.
Mercy, tell me about where you got this new role. Congratulations. Tell me about where that came from. You talked a lot about networking. Was that where it was?
Yeah, so absolutely. And it's so funny because sometimes these opportunities, just come out of left field where you wouldn't expect them to. But just checking in with an ex-colleague, she's in New York, and just was kind of checking in with her and telling her where I was at within my process, like obviously being unemployed and potentially thinking to pivot, from advertising and tech, and just chatting with her too to check in where she was. And she happened to mention that she had a friend at a certain tech company. And I was like, oh. She's like, yeah, maybe you should check on their site and see if they have anything. And I'm like, oh, bummer, they don't have anything. But I was like, do you mind? Like, I went the extra mile. I was like, do you mind just putting me in contact with her anyways? Because right now they don't have anything, but you never know. And that's exactly what happened. Connected with the hiring manager. We actually didn't chat until she had an opportunity. And then she was like, hey, I have 2 opportunities. Like, out of nowhere, she's like, I have 2 opportunities, A or B. Like, which one do you think you'd be more interested? I want you to apply and I'll, interview you, and you obviously go through the entire process, see if you're a fit. But that's pretty much how it happened. Like just reconnecting with a connection I had, an ex-colleague, and her putting it out there, me going the extra mile, because maybe I could have easily said, oh, there's nothing on there. Okay, well, maybe like next time, or, I'll hit you up again in 2 months. Maybe I would have forgotten about it if I didn't have like a tracking system. But I went the extra mile, and Emma was like, hey, do you mind putting me in contact with her now in the event that something opened up? And super appreciative on the hiring managers, and that she actually even remembered me, because we never spoke. We added each other on LinkedIn. She read my message, and kind of like she didn't reply until she had something, which was kind of cool. And that's it. Went through the process, had 5 interviews, and it's a contract role, but with potential to extend all the way through the end of next year, which is huge. Will provide a lot of stability, and it's as a project manager. It's for a tech brand. So overall, like super excited, because it's exactly where I wanted to be.
Well, congratulations. I think that's kind of the core, is constantly momentum, positivity, and constantly talking to new people, putting yourself out there, sitting down every morning and applying to 100 jobs, and then having lunch and applying to 100 more. You're never going to stand out. You're not going to get anywhere. But what you did, always asking for that extra introduction, always putting yourself out there. Congratulations. I'm glad it led to something you're excited about.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Mercy, for better or for worse, you are an unemployment pro. You have nailed it a few times. A lot of people are going through this for their first time. What is your advice to somebody who gets laid off today and calls you and says, Mercy, I'm freaking out. I don't know what's going to happen. What do I do? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, breathe, because I have now been, like you said, been through this a few times, and it always works out. Like, that's the thing. Like, no matter what, it always works out. So there's no need to stress or panic. I think it's like, take the moment, take it in. Yes, you got, like, whether it's layoff or, you got fired or whatever it may be, like, take it in, breathe, calm down, and know that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Even during the pandemic, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So I think the key is staying positive, taking the breath, taking the moment. Maybe that day, you do need to go hang out with a friend, or you do need to like be outdoor in nature, like whatever it is to calm you down and kind of reset you. And then I would say, as soon as you can in the next few days, once you've kind of gotten over that emotional, like, pain of like losing your job or being let go or fired or whatever it may be, is really taking those action steps that I mentioned. So it is filing for the unemployment, getting the information. Maybe it's your first time, so maybe first it's just gaining information, right? So like, am I eligible? How do I apply? Finding out about the health insurance, that's so key too. Looking at your finances. So it's all the things that I mentioned towards the beginning of our chat, is doing all that, but first taking a step back and not panicking. Like, really just breathe, because trust me, now I think I've had total probably like 4 lapses, and I always bounce back.
Breathe is the best advice.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Mercy, thank you so much for being with us.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.